All right, welcome back. It's Thursday the 17th. We're going to do another 10 minutes of reading from the Anarchist Handbook, organized by Michael Malice. You should get yourself a physical copy. Again, 10 minutes a day, and we're starting today on page 75. We're continuing with Mikhail Bakunin from The State and Marxism, 1867, and God and the State, 1870. So we're going to be starting on about a third of the way down on page 75 today, and I'm just going to jump right in it. Get a little sip of water first. Okay, here we go. Suppose the government to be confined only to the best citizens. At first, these citizens are privileged not by right, but by fact. They have been elected by the people because they are the most intelligent, clever, wise, and courageous, and devoted. Taken from the mass of the citizens, who are regarded as all equal, they do not yet form a class apart, but a group of men privileged only by nature and for that very reason singled out for election by the people. Their number is necessarily very limited. For in all times and countries, the number of men endowed with qualities so remarkable that they automatically command the unanimous respect of a nation is, as experience teaches us, very small. Therefore, under pain of making a bad choice, the people will be always forced to choose its rulers from among them. Here, then, is society divided into two categories, if not yet to say two classes, of which one, composed of the immense majority of the citizens, submits freely to the government of its elected leaders, the other, formed of a small number of privileged nature, recognized and accepted as such by the people, and charged by them to govern them. Dependent on popular election, they are at first distinguished from the mass of the citizens only by the very qualities which recommended them to their choice and are naturally the most devoted and useful of all. They do not yet assume to themselves any privilege, any particular right, except that of exercising, insofar as the people wish it, the special functions with which... Sorry about that. Sometimes my screen goes dark, and I like to make sure I'm still recording. Dependent on popular election, they are first distinguished from the mass of the citizens only by the very qualities which recommended them to their choice and are naturally the most devoted and useful of all. They do not yet assume to themselves any privilege, any particular right, except that of exercising, insofar as the people wish it, the special functions with which they have been charged. For the rest, by their manner of life, by the conditions and means of their existence, they do not separate themselves in any way from all the others, so that a perfect equality continues to reign among all. Can this equality be long maintained? We claim that it cannot, and nothing is easier to prove it. Nothing is more dangerous for man's private morality than the habit of command. The best man, the most intelligent, disinterested, generous, pure, will infallibly and always be spoiled at this trade. Two sentiments inherent in power never fail to produce this demoralization. They are contempt for the masses and the overestimation of one's own merits. The masses, in quotes, a man says to himself, quote, recognizing their incapacity to govern on their own account, have elected me their chief. By that act they have publicly proclaimed their inferiority and my superiority. Among this crowd of men, recognizing hardly any equals of myself, I am alone capable of directing public affairs. The people have need of me. They cannot do without my services, while I, on the contrary, can get along all right by myself. They, therefore, must obey me for their own security, and in condescending to command them, I am doing them a good turn." End quote. Is not there something in all that to make a man lose his head and his heart as well, and become mad with pride? It is thus that power and the habit of command become, for even the most intelligent and virtuous men, a source of aberration. both intellectual and moral. But in the people's state of Marx, there will be, we are told, no privileged class at all. All will be equal, not only from the juridical and political point of view, but from the economic point of view. At least that is what is promised, though I doubt very much, considering the manner in which it is being tackled and the course it is desired to follow, whether that promise could ever be kept. There will therefore be no longer any privileged class, but there will be a government, and, note this well, an extremely complex government, which will not content itself with governing and administering the masses politically, as all governments do today, but which will also administer them economically, concentrating in its own hands the production and the just division of wealth, the cultivation of land, the establishment and development of factories, the organization and direction of commerce, finally the application of capital to production by the only banker, the state. All that will demand an immense knowledge and many, quote, heads overflowing with brains in this government. It will be the reign of scientific intelligence, the most aristocratic, despotic, arrogant, and contemptuous of all regimes. There will be a new class, a new hierarchy of real and pretended scientists and scholars, and the world will be divided into a minority ruling in the name of knowledge and an immense ignorant majority. And then woe betide the mass of ignorant ones. That's quite a paragraph. I'm going to go ahead and make a note to come back to that later myself. Such a regime will not fail to arouse very considerable discontent in this mass. In order to keep it in check, the Enlightenment and liberating government of Marx will have need of a not less considerable armed force. For the government must be strong, says Engels, to maintain order among these millions of illiterates whose brutal uprising would be capable of destroying and overthrowing everything, even a government directed by heads overflowing with brains. You can see quite well that behind all the democratic and socialistic phrases and promises of Marx's program, there is to be found in his state all that constitutes the true despotic and brutal nature of all states. Whatever may be the form of their government, and that in the final reckoning, the people's state so strongly commended by Marx, and the aristocratic monarchic state maintained with as much cleverness as power by Bismarck, are completely identical by the nature of their objective at home as well as in foreign affairs. In foreign affairs, it is the same deployment of military force, that is to say, conquest. And in home affairs, it is the same employment of this armed force, the last argument of all threatened political powers against the masses, who, tired of believing, hoping, and submitting, and obeying always, rise in revolt. Marx's communist idea comes to light in all his writings. It is also manifest in the motions put forward by the General Council of the International Working Men's Association, situated in London, at the Congress of Basel in 1869, as well as by the proposals which he had intended to present to the Congress, which was to take place in September 1870, but which had to be suspended because of the Franco-German War. As a member of the General Council in London and as corresponding secretary for Germany, Marx enjoys in this council, as it is well known, a great, and it must be admitted, legitimate influence, so that it can be taken for certain that of the motions put to the Congress by the Council, several are principally derived from the system and the collaboration of Marx. It was in this way that the English citizen Lucraft, a member of the General Council, put forward at the Congress of Basel the idea that all the land in a country should become the property of the state, and that the cultivation of this land should be directed and administered by state officials, which, he added, quote, will only be possible in a democratic and socialist state in which the people will have to watch carefully over the good administration of the national land by the state. This cult of the state is, in general, the principal characteristic of German socialism. Lassalle, the greatest socialist agitator and the true founder of the practical socialist movement in Germany, was steeped in it. He saw no salvation for the workers except in the power of the state, of which the workers should possess themselves, according to him, by means of universal suffrage. And we'll go ahead and stop right there. It's a little bit short, but that's okay because we're going to be continuing about 25% of the way down under a subheading, What is Authority, on page 78. So again, reading out of Bakunin from around late 1860s to 1870. Interesting stuff. And this is all from the Anarchist Handbook, organized by Michael Malice. We'll see you tomorrow.